June 12th, 1876. Castlebar Station, Ireland. 11:47 a.m. The platform is empty. Sandford Fleming stands alone, his leather suitcase resting against the iron bench, his pocket watch clutched in his palm. The hands read 11:47. The train schedule, printed neatly on the board above him, reads 11:35 a.m. He's been here since 11:20. The tracks stretch into the mist like steel ribbons disappearing into uncertainty. No whistle, no rumble, no cloud of steam breaking through the gray Irish sky. Just silence, thick, humiliating silence. Fleming is not a man accustomed to waiting. He's a railway engineer, a surveyor who mapped thousands of miles of Canadian wilderness for the Intercolonial Railway, a man who built bridges across rivers that swallowed lesser men whole. And yet here he stands, stranded on a wind-beaten platform in the west of Ireland, victim of something far more chaotic than nature. A mistake. Not his mistake, the railway's mistake. The timetable lied. Or rather, it told a version of the truth that no longer applied by the time Fleming arrived. The train had left, not at 11:35 a.m., but at 11:35 by a different clock, a clock in another town, a clock running on local solar time, where noon occurred when the sun crossed the meridian, not when some distant authority declared it so. In 1876, there was no such thing as synchronized time. Every town kept its own time. Dublin ran 12 minutes ahead of Galway. London was 5 minutes and 21 seconds ahead of Bristol. New York was nearly 4 minutes ahead of Philadelphia. If you traveled west by rail, time itself seemed to slip backward. If you traveled east, it leapt forward in jagged, unpredictable intervals. Fleming feels the sting of it now. Not just the inconvenience, but the absurdity. He spent years synchronizing rail lines, aligning tracks to the inch, ensuring trains don't collide in tunnels or derail on switches, and yet the very concept of when remains ungoverned, uncoordinated, a patchwork of local customs that makes a mockery of progress. He snaps the watch shut. A thought begins to form, not loud, not sudden, but insistent. A whisper that will grow into a roar. What if time itself could be engineered? 15 years earlier, the world had begun to shrink. Not literally, but to anyone paying attention, it certainly felt that way. The railroad was no longer a curiosity. It was the circulatory system of industrial civilization. Iron horses pulled freight and families across continents at speeds that would have seemed like sorcery a generation prior. In 1850, there were roughly 9,000 miles of railway track in the United States. By 1876, there were more than 75,000. The telegraph made it worse, or better, depending on your perspective. Messages that once took weeks by horseback now took seconds. A clerk in Chicago could send a telegram to San Francisco and receive a reply before his coffee went cold. Information moved faster than people, faster than goods, faster than the sun itself seemed to travel across the sky. And that was the problem. Because while trains and telegrams could race across time zones, time itself couldn't keep up. Railway companies tried to manage it. They printed timetables. They hired clerks to update schedules. They installed station clocks. But every clock was an island. Every town a kingdom unto itself, declaring noon when the sun deemed it so. A train leaving Boston at noon might arrive in Albany at noon, according to Albany's clocks, even though 2 hours had passed. Collisions became common, not always fatal, but frequent enough to rattle investors and terrify passengers. In 1853, 2 trains collided head-on near Providence, Rhode Island, killing 14 people. The cause? Conflicting schedules based on different local times. The engineer of one train believed he had clearance. The other believed the same. Both were right, and both were wrong. It wasn't just dangerous. It was maddening. Fleming wasn't the first to notice, but he might have been the first to care enough to do something about it. He boards the next train 3 hours later, his mind no longer on Ireland. It's on the world. And the world, whether it knows it yet or not, is about to change.
October 1876. Ottawa, Canada. The office of the Canadian Pacific Railway. Sandford Fleming spreads a map across his desk. Not a map of terrain, but a map of chaos. Red lines crisscross the page, each one representing a different railway company. Blue annotations mark time zones that don't technically exist yet, just local approximations. Black ink notes the discrepancies. Chicago, 12 minutes behind Columbus. Toronto, 25 minutes behind Montreal. Winnipeg, running on Solent time, impossible to coordinate. He's been at this for weeks now, ever since that empty platform in Ireland. What began as frustration has crystallized into obsession. Fleming is 50 years old. His beard is turning silver, his shoulders slightly stooped from decades of bending over surveying equipment and drafting tables. But his eyes, sharp, restless, betray a mind that refuses to slow down. He's built railways through granite mountains and muskeg swamps. He's designed Canada's first postage stamp. He's proposed a telegraph cable spanning the entire Pacific Ocean, linking Canada to Australia. And now, he's staring at the problem no amount of iron or engineering can solve. Time is broken. Not metaphorically, literally. He picks up his pen and begins to write. The letter is addressed to the Royal Canadian Institute, one of the most respected scientific bodies in the British Empire. Fleming chooses his words carefully. He knows how this will sound. A railway engineer proposing to reorganize something as fundamental as time itself. It borders on madness, or arrogance, or both. But he writes anyway. Gentlemen, I wish to propose a system whereby the entire globe may be divided into 24 zones, each representing 1 hour of longitudinal difference, a single universal standard from which all local times may be derived. A clock that does not bow to the sun, but governs it. He pauses, reads it back. Crosses out governs it. Too bold. He replaces it with coordinates with it. Better. The idea isn't entirely new. Astronomers had used something called Greenwich Mean Time for decades, a way of synchronizing celestial observations by referencing the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England. But that was for scientists, for men peering through telescopes at distant stars. Fleming's vision is different. He wants to synchronize everything. Every train, every telegraph office, every clock on every street corner. A world where noon in London and noon in New York are no longer the same moment, but are at least predictable. Where a traveler boarding a train in Halifax knows, without doubt, without confusion, when that train will arrive in Vancouver. A world where time is no longer local, where time is global. He mails the letter in November. The response comes in January. Polite, curious, skeptical. The Institute agrees to let him present his idea at their next meeting, but there's a warning embedded in the chairman's reply. We caution you that such a proposal will face considerable opposition, not merely from railway companies, but from municipalities, religious authorities, and the general public, all of whom have vested interests in maintaining local solar time. Fleming folds the letter and sets it aside. He's not worried about opposition. He spent his entire career moving mountains. February 8th. 1877. The Royal Canadian Institute, Toronto. The lecture hall is packed. Engineers, astronomers, railway executives, government officials, they fill the wooden pews like congregants waiting for a sermon. Some are here out of genuine curiosity, others out of skepticism. A few are here simply because Sandford Fleming's name carries weight, and when a man of his reputation speaks, you listen. Fleming stands at the podium, a large globe beside him. He's dressed formally, black suit, white collar, a watch chain glinting beneath the gas lamps. His hands rest on the edges of the lectern, steady. He begins. Gentlemen, imagine for a moment that you are a railway conductor. Your train is scheduled to depart Montreal at 3 p.m., bound for Toronto. You check your pocket watch. It reads 3 p.m. You signal the engineer. The whistle blows. The train departs. He pauses, letting the image settle. Now imagine that, unbeknownst to you, the station clock in Montreal is running 7 minutes fast, and the clock in Toronto is running 4 minutes slow. And the telegram you received this morning confirming your departure time was sent from Ottawa, where the clocks run on yet another standard entirely. A murmur ripples through the audience. This is not a hypothetical, gentlemen. This is the world we live in. He turns to the globe, spinning it slowly. I propose a solution. For the next 2 hours, Fleming lays it out. 24 time zones, each spanning 15 degrees of longitude. A prime meridian, he suggests Greenwich, since it's already used by astronomers, from which all other zones are calculated. Clocks that no longer shift with the sun, but remain fixed, synchronized across continents. He demonstrates with diagrams. He cites railway accidents. He references telegraph companies losing money because messages are time-stamped inconsistently. He appeals to logic, to safety, to progress. And when he's finished, the room erupts. Not in applause, in argument.
The first man to stand is a railway executive from the Grand Trunk Railway. His face is flushed, his voice sharp. Mr. Fleming, with all due respect, you're asking us to throw away 10,000 years of human civilization. Since the dawn of time, noon has been when the sun is at its highest point. You're proposing we ignore the sun entirely. Do you realize how unnatural that is? A murmur of agreement ripples through the hall. Fleming remains calm. I'm proposing we acknowledge reality. The sun doesn't care about train schedules, but train schedules must care about each other. Another voice rises, an astronomer this time, older, his spectacles catching the lamplight. And what of the observatories? We rely on solar time for celestial calculations. Are we to abandon accuracy for the sake of convenience? You would keep your own time. This system doesn't eliminate local solar time, it simply provides a framework, a universal reference point that allows coordination across distances. But the astronomer isn't satisfied. And who decides this reference point? You've suggested Greenwich. Why should the entire world synchronize itself to England? Fleming hesitates. It's a fair question, and a dangerous one, because buried within it is something bigger than logistics. It's about power, about empire, about whether the world should orbit London, literally, temporally, or whether time itself should belong to no nation at all. He doesn't have a perfect answer. Not yet. The meeting dissolves into chaos. Arguments erupt across the hall. A Presbyterian minister stands and declares that God's time cannot be replaced by man's arrogance. A shipping merchant insists that sailors have managed for centuries without such a system, so why fix what isn't broken? He listens to all of it. The anger, the fear, the stubborn clinging to tradition. And beneath it, he hears something else. Resistance to change. It's not about the sun. It's not about accuracy or convenience. It's about the terror of surrendering something fundamental, something that has governed human life since the first sundial cast its shadow on stone. Time has always been local, personal, rooted in the place you stand. Fleming is asking them to let go of that, to trust that a clock in London can govern a farmer in Manitoba, that a telegraph operator in San Francisco can synchronize with a clerk in Berlin, that the world can operate as a single coordinated machine. It sounds like progress. To many in this room, it sounds like tyranny. Fleming doesn't leave discouraged. If anything, he's energized. Because he knows something the critics don't. The world is already changing, whether they accept it or not. Railways are expanding. Telegraphs are multiplying. Trade is accelerating. The old ways, beautiful, chaotic, sun-centered, are collapsing under their own weight. Time will be standardized. The only question is, will it happen through deliberate design or through catastrophe? March 1878, Washington, D.C. Fleming boards a steamship bound for the United States. He's been invited to present his proposal to the American Metrological Society, a group of scientists and engineers obsessed with measurement, precision, and order. If anyone will understand, it's them. The crossing is rough. Atlantic swells batter the hull, and Fleming spends most of the voyage in his cabin revising his presentation. He's learned from Toronto. He needs to be sharper, more persuasive, less idealistic, more pragmatic. He needs to speak their language. The Metrological Society meets in a modest hall near Capitol Hill. The audience is smaller than in Toronto, maybe 40 men, most of them engineers or academics. But the atmosphere is different, less hostile, more curious. Fleming presents again. This time he emphasizes the economic benefits. Lost revenue from missed connections, accidents costing lives and lawsuits, the absurdity of a railway company operating 53 different local times across its network, a real example from the Pennsylvania Railroad. He also introduces something new. A clock. Not a real one, a conceptual one. He calls it cosmic time. It's a 24-hour clock that begins at midnight in Greenwich and cycles through the entire globe. No AM or PM. No confusion. Hour 0, hour 12, hour 23. Simple. Universal. Unmistakable. Imagine a world where a telegram sent from New York at hour 14 arrives in London at hour 19. Both parties know exactly when it was sent and received, regardless of where they stand on the Earth's surface. The room is silent. Then slowly, a man in the front row begins to clap. Others join. Not everyone, but enough. March 1880. Oppenheim, Germany. Word spreads. Fleming is invited to speak before the American Society of Civil Engineers, then the American Association for the Advancement of Science, then railway conventions in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Boston. Everywhere he goes, the reception is mixed. Some embrace the idea immediately. Others call him a fool. A few accuse him of being a British imperialist, trying to impose Greenwich on sovereign American soil. Fleming doesn't argue. He listens. He adapts. He realizes that the greatest obstacle isn't technical. It's psychological. People don't fear the clock. They fear what it represents. A loss of autonomy. A surrender to something larger than themselves. The creeping sense that the world is no longer theirs to control. That they're becoming cogs in a vast, impersonal machine. Fleming understands. But he also knows the machine is already running. October, 1879. London, England. Fleming stands outside the Royal Society, the most prestigious scientific institution in the world. He's been invited to present his findings to an audience of astronomers, mathematicians, and lords. This is the moment. If he can convince them, if he can win over the scientists who set the standards for the British Empire, then the rest of the world might follow. He adjusts his collar, takes a breath. The door opens, and Sandford Fleming walks into the room where time will finally begin to change.